Well, hello, DCO Nation, and welcome back from the holidays. Welcome to another DCO Live. Guys, there's a ton of you on here tonight. Didn't know actually how many people were going to jump on here after the 2 week break, but Heath, good to see you, buddy. Brian is on, Russell's on. I think that is all that's in the chat right now. Looks like we got a few more guys. I can see the little eye up here of people who were actually on but haven't joined up the chat. But I appreciate everybody, coming back in. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Bill at Kayak or Die. Bill and I, we met a couple of years ago. I don't know if you guys heard the radio show on Wednesday. But I met Brian down in, man, I keep calling him Brian. I met Bill down in Charleston, and we just kind of kept connected and sent me a hat and, a couple of stickers. So Bill, appreciate you, man. The merchandise that he has, Kayak or Die, I don't know if you guys know about it, but it's top quality stuff, man. I love the hat. So again, Bill, really do appreciate it. Go over there to kayakordie.com. I am not sponsored by him at all. Just trying to support a friend, small business, great guy. So go over there and check him out. But guys, tonight I have Mr. Steve Leo on. Steve, good to see you, buddy. It has been a while. It's been way too long since you've been on here, but I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, Chris. And yeah, it's been a minute, but I'm definitely glad to be on. I got a good bourbon and I get to chat with you. So it's going to be a great night.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Before we even kind of got started, when we first jumped on, we were like, okay, timeout. We need to get a beverage going here. And so cheers, buddy. I appreciate you. But even though we haven't talked, it's almost kind of like we fell right back into it again. We were just chatting it right back up. And But guys, Steve is my go-to for sheepshead fishing. And I am actually going to head down to Charleston tomorrow and do some sheepshead fishing. So I thought it would be a great time to have Steve on. I know that this is kind of the time of the year that a lot of people target sheepshead. So I thought it would be great just to kind of go through some basics, setups, all that kind of stuff. So we're just going to kind of walk through it. But Steve, let's just start kind of right with, rod and reel setup. What's kind of, your go-to for rod and reel setup?
Sure. So last few years, been running a toadfish rod and reel. It's their convict rod. So it's specifically for sheepshead. And I'll try to swing this in front of the camera here. So
yeah,
you guys can kind of see it's a 511 and it is medium extra fast. So it's got, that fast tip so you can feel the bites. I would say for us being kayak fishermen, I think having that shorter rod is kind of make or break. I've tried it, when I've forgotten my sheepshead rod when I've been out there, and I've just used like my 7.2, and it's tough. You're always banging into docks. So I think having that shorter rod, that 511 toadfish convict rod, and matter of fact, before I went with that one, I used this one for years. I've probably had this since high school. It's an old ugly stick. It's just 5 flat, and it's a light action.
Oh, so wow.
It is a tiny, tiny rod, but I can't tell you the amount of sheepshead I've caught on that rod. Probably more than that, the toadfish one, just because it's so sensitive.
Right.
And being that it's the ugly stick, it's super, super strong, good backing. But
right.
I think that shorter rod lets you get in tighter spots. It's kind of the benefit of being a kayak fisherman, is that we can get to those spots that the boats can't, between pilings, under docks, whatever it may be. So I think you kind of have to use that to your advantage and use a shorter rod. Yeah. In terms of the reels that I usually run, like 3000 series. That's what's on that one. It's a toadfish, just 3000 series. Okay. That's what I had on that ugly stick. It was an Akuma. before it just kind of rotted out over the years. But those are always kind of my go-to sheepshead combos. Just 3000 series and a short rod with a good tip.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. I don't have a short rod,
Yeah.
so I'm just going to have to use, just kind of what I use for inshore fishing, which,
Yeah.
is going to be a 7 foot medium light. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what I've got. So,
Yeah.
it kind of is
You can
what it
make it work.
is. But I knew I needed a short rod to get in there, and I am gonna go pick one up. Don't tell my wife. I am gonna go. I'm gonna go pick one up. She doesn't watch the live, so she'll know
Yeah.
that. but yeah, I'm definitely gonna go get a setup. So anything like 6 foot or shorter is kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah. And again, I think if you were doing it from a dock or a boat or a bridge or something, then it doesn't really matter. But I think if we're going to do the kayak fishing, I think you got to take advantage of that so you can get into those little nooks. I've made it work with 7.2s and 7s just in a pinch.
Yeah.
You just got to watch your tip when you're kind of, getting the fish out of there or flipping around. So, but definitely
Right.
do it.
Right, right. Okay, so we've got rod and reel. Let's talk about your line and maybe even a leader. What are you using?
Yeah. So I believe this toadfish right now has got 20-pound braid on there. And depending on which kayak I'm in for the day, because we've got two identical natives, I leave. I just leave fluoro in both of them. I think
Okay.
one of them's a 15, the other one's probably 20 pounds. So that's kind of always my go-to is that 15 to 20 for both fluoro and for braid. I
Okay.
think you can go a little heavier on the fluoro, and I have. Um, it gets a little harder to tie the knots, and
Right.
I think sometimes you lose some sensitivity with the sheepshead bites. So if you're going to go that 15 on that lighter end, that's fine. Just I would check your leader more often, and in case you're getting a lot of fraying or things of those nature. Where it's going to rub on pilings or oyster shells or whatever.
Yeah, and that's you beat me to it. So I was going to ask you about, um, the heavier fluorocarbon leaders, a 30 or a 40 because of the barnacles and the oyster and everything around there, but you're not really too worried about that. 15 is just fine for you. You're not seeing a
Yeah,
lot of
15, 20. I've
okay.
ran 30, and I'll tell you a story where I stopped running 30 is I got
Okay.
a snag and I could not get it out. So I grabbed the front of the rod to try to and I snapped my rod.
Oh
So
man. Okay.
it was like I'd rather be able to break off if I need to because there's so many snags, but then 15 is still that sweet spot where you're not going to lose a fish. You just got to check for abrasions on the line every so often if you're in some nasty stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I tell you what, you talk about snags around docks. Man, I don't know what some of these dock owners throw underneath these things, but man, there's netting, there's rope, there's electrical cords, there's cinder
Yeah.
blocks, there's all kinds of stuff down there. So, yeah, being able to, when you do get snagged, being able to break off is probably pretty important.
Yeah, I think you covered pretty much all of them. The electro cords that run underwater, man, those ones are. You're like, I don't see anything. What am I? And then you start reeling it up. You're like, oh, that's somebody's power cords
Start
for the
to see
dock.
it. I know.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah,
It's crazy. But okay, so we're going to work right to the end of the line. What are you using as far as your terminal tackle,
yep.
hooks, weights, all
So
that kind of stuff?
there's a few different rigs that I'll run, and it's all going to be kind of dependent on conditions. My go-to, probably 90% of the time, is just going to be a Carolina rig. So it's standard, right? You're just going braid, weight, bead to a swivel um, to your leader, and then I usually keep. Let me see if I can do this without hooking myself here. Well, actually, you know what? I've got some in the package. It's probably a safer option. I keep a few different hooks around. Most of them are going to be mosquito hooks. It's just going to vary on size. So these are probably my go-to. Just one
Okay.
aught mosquito hooks, owners. Sometimes I'll keep a package of circle hooks. So it's just the same thing, just a circle hook. Sometimes it'll just be the straight shank, but both of those 1/0s and 2s I'll keep in there, and sometimes I'll just mix and match between the two of them. Same thing with weights, right? It's going to be dependent on the tidal coefficient, how strong the tide is on that day, and kind of what's going on, dependent on how much weight I'm using. The other rig that I really like, and it's kind of a specific situation when I use it. I would say boat guys use it more on the jetties, but similar to this, but instead of kind of a Carolina rig, you're just going to tie a knot to knot from your braid to your fluoro and then just run a split shot and then just go right to your mosquito hook.
Okay. Okay.
And that'll kind of be, I'll use that one more so when they're up high. Like I think most guys will think, okay, I'm sheepshead fishing, I want to be on the bottom. And that's true a lot of times, but there'll be tons of time where I'm just hanging around docks, right? Not even piling, just hanging around docks. And I'll look and you can see them. They'll come up and they'll just pick off the bottom of the dock. So they're up high in the column. And if you're using, a heavy Carolina rig, you're going to miss them. So just floating it with a tide with just a small little split shot and that fiddler, you can just kind of get it in a different part of the water column.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah. I never even thought about that. So, okay. So like a number one mosquito, some split shots, put
Yep.
on as many, to kind of control the fall and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's another advantage for us being in the pedal kayaks is when the tide's ripping one way, you can just kind of pedal in place, flip it up, and then it'll just drift right onto there like a crab floating in the tide, essentially. And some of the biggest sheeps that I've ever caught have just been on that split shot and mosquito hook rig.
Okay. All right. Cool, man. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but what are you putting on that hook? What is your bait of choice?
Yeah, if the best is always going to be fiddler crabs, in my opinion. In the winter, it's a little tougher to get them. At least get them yourself. I always like to pick them, and that's way easier when it's warm. I like if I were to go out right now, there's no shot they're going to be out. Maybe midday they'll come out for a bit, but if you can get them at a bait shop, that's the best. If not, you can kind of mix in some other things. I know guys will crush up oyster shells and put them in like little bags and tie them around the hooks.
Yep.
And you can also kind of churn them up with the oyster shells. Caught them on corn, which is a little bit of a funky one, but you can kind of churn them up with corn too, like it would be if you were to throw oyster shells out. There's all kinds of wonky things that you could really get them on. I mean, I've experimented big time. So
yeah, I remember you talking about corn the last time that we were on, and that's incredible. Incredible. I actually I reached out to Captain Tanya, and I was picking her brain for a minute on it, and she uses some frozen mussels that she gets from the grocery store. And she tries to keep them frozen because they stay on the hook better, she said. So, and she has shared that on the show before. So I'm not, giving out any type of a trade secret or anything. So I feel confident she'll be okay when I say, hey, you can use that.
And I've never thought to freeze them. That's a fantastic idea. I bought canned ones and used canned ones. But you run into that issue that she mentioned that they don't stay on very well.
Yeah, they don't stay on. So so she tries to, she'll take out a couple of handfuls, try to keep them in a baggie on ice, try to keep them frozen, as long as she can. So the frozen mussels, I think I'm going to try. So, I'm going to try to get some fiddler crabs. I'm going to stop on the way down, pick them up, and then, try some frozen mussels, tomorrow.
I've tried artificials without really any consistent success. I think one of your past episodes, it might have been a couple of years ago, you were using like the fake crab,
right?
I think you ended up catching a big old flounder on it.
I did. Matter of fact, nope, I don't have it over here. But yeah, it was the Savage Gear. It was maybe the size of a quarter, and it was a quarter ounce on it. And I had heard people, saying, hey, if you slather it up with enough, Blue Crab Pro Cure, you may be able to pick something up. Well,
Yeah.
hell, I caught a flounder on it,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, no sheepshead, but, but
Yeah.
anyway.
I think the scent is the big thing. And maybe if the tide was right, and I've had some limited success catching shorts with them, but I think the tide has to be right where it's like it's floating by naturally and they don't have enough time to look at it. They just grab it. Because I've caught them on voodoos before and not trying to target them, just flounder fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, more times than I can kind of really have tried to do it, but it's been quite a few times where I'll cast out and I'm just popping the voodoo and I'm reeling it in, and there's just like a sheepshead. They just follow it in.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
you can probably get lucky. I wouldn't be my go-to if I was trying to target them, but
Yeah. Yeah. So, Galen said, "Have you ever tried the artificial for sheep?" And yeah, I have. I've tried it. I've never done it. And then or canned oysters. Again, the canned oysters we've never tried. So,
yeah,
but I am going to try the frozen ones. But
yeah, that's the move to freeze them. I think that's a good call.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think so too. But so let's talk tide. Does tide matter? Does current need to be there, or let's talk tide a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's probably the second most important thing. Like if I'm going out sheepshead fishing, right? I'm checking I'm checking the tide and the tidal coefficient. Those are two big ones. And obviously, you can't check it, but you got to have the spots. That's probably number one. You got to have water depth, in my opinion.
Okay.
But tides, for sure. Like in a perfect world, if I could plan a day, I would go out probably 2 hours into the incoming tide, and I'd fish the rest of the incoming tide, and maybe an hour or two into the outgoing. That's probably. I like more water than less water because I'm always vertically fishing for them. So a lot of my spots at low tide might only be 4 foot,
Okay.
but at that high tide, you're going to be 6, 7, 8, whatever it is, depending on the tide. Coefficient will matter just based off of like the strength of the tide, right? If it's too strong, it's kind of a pain to keep where you need to be, both yourself and the kayak, like positionally,
Hmm.
and your bait. So I try to look and stay around like 60 to 70 for that tidal coefficient on whatever tidal app you want to use.
Right.
But the flip side of that would be if it's a real low tide, or if it's a lazy tide, like it's not really flowing much. I think they kind of get lazy, and your bait, if you're not using the right weight, your bait is just gonna like glue to the bottom. Like you need to have that kind of like movement of the crab.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's you're just going to be catching like oyster toadfish that are just glued on the bottom and just coming by.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So
Yeah.
there's kind of both sides of that title.
Okay. So what I'm looking at tomorrow is high tide is going to be right around, it's either 12 or 12:30. It's something like that. So it's going to be, noon. I was planning on being out on the water right around 9 o'clock ish.
Mm-hmm.
And again, kind of fishing that, what is that, 3 hours before, maybe a couple hours after.
Perfect.
We're not going to get a big tide swing tomorrow. It's
Yeah.
maybe only about 4 foot of tide swing.
Yeah.
So, it's not going to
Perfect.
be, sweeping in, 7 feet, a tide coming in. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
right in the middle. So what do you think? I mean, it's the only day that I can fish. So I really,
Yeah.
beggars can't be choosers, but I mean,
You got to make it work. That sounds like a good day, just based off of those numbers and those conditions. But
okay. All right. Well, I'm going to hold you to that. It's going to be a
yeah.
good day. I'm going to be on them. All right. And
Yep.
if I don't, I'm going to blame you. So.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair
Okay.
enough.
Cool. So let's go into uh, maybe some common mistakes.
Okay.
Guys who go out, they fish for sheepshead. Maybe they're not getting them, they can't find them.
Yeah.
What are maybe some common mistakes?
I would say number one is location. In my opinion, they're like, if you're going to be consistently on them and have consistent success with it, like you need to know where they're at. It's not like I'm not saying flounder or distributed everywhere, but like there's maybe more environment to catch a flounder than there is a sheepshead, say in our waters.
Mhm.
So I think the biggest thing is knowing where to fish. And part of that is either going to be structure based or depth based. And it's not to say that you won't see them in shallow water on the flats, because I've seen them in Merle's Inlet crossing the flats. They're just
Yeah.
cruising around.
Yep.
And I guess if you were maybe standing up at a fly rod or something, you could kind of finessely get a bait in front of them. But like how we would fish in the kayaks and being mostly vertical or just pitching along, you need the structure and you need depth. And I see a lot of guys trying for them. Will ask questions, and I'm like, first of all, you're like just casting out in the middle of the channel. And I'm like, not to say that they wouldn't be there, because they could be. There could be something down there that they're feeding on, maybe like an old crab pot that I have some spots like that. But
Right.
you're better off dropping straight down if you were on a dock than casting out in the channel.
Okay.
You know, and so structure and depth, right? So I know you got the depth finder on your kayak,
Mhm.
and with that tide you're going out, I wouldn't touch anything under 5 feet. Probably,
Okay.
to be honest.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I know the areas that I'm going to target at high tide. It's probably, gosh, around that one area is probably at least 10, if not 12 feet at
Perfect.
high tide.
Yeah.
So, and I do know the docks I'm going to be targeting, there's not going to be a whole lot of room for me to get underneath these docks
Yeah.
either. So I'm
Yeah.
going to have to kind of work the outside or hug and pitch, in and under those docks. So,
Right.
But,
Use that kayak to your advantage, right? You can get in those little nooks and crannies, and hell, I've even held on to docks, if the
oh yeah,
round, just, hey, like most people are cool with it. I've been run off a time or two, but you kind of got to use that to your advantage, because like the big boats or even bay boats or skiffs, they're not usually going to get as close that we can, in our little plastic boats. But that, and just the other thing is, even when I've taken quite a few people out sheepshead fishing who are new to it, like you can't. It's not just being on the dock itself, right? Like you kind of got to know how the tide's flowing, how your bait's going to flow, and then know where to pick to drop your bait, right? Like if the piling's on the closest side of the channel, right, not closest to the bank, right,
right.
you probably want to flip on the inside of it to get in the
Okay.
middle of the dock, right?
Mhm.
And it's just kind of, however, maybe stacked that day. I've had some spots where I'm consistently catching them in the middle of the dock, and I have other spots where they're always a few feet off of the dock into, towards the channel. So it's probably just how the bottom is or how the structure is, but it's a lot of just kind of trial and error. I hate to kind of leave it up to trial and error like that, but it's
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, you gotta figure out kind of where they're staging at. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. Some
Yeah.
days they're on the bottom and they are fine with literally dropping straight down and no cranks. Other times I'm dropping down, I'm cranking 3 or 4 times. Sometimes I'm pitching and keeping it literally right to the bottom of the dock. And it just kind of depends, I guess, on what they're doing that day, how they're feeding.
Uh, Caitlin Holt just jumped back in again, and she said, "Do you ever find it hard to feel the bite of a sheep's head?"
Yeah, that's probably another good point to bring up for things that people will miss, or mistakes people make. They're called the convict fish, right? Because they'll just steal your bait and you won't even feel the bite. So I always try to keep finger on the line for just that tap, and you're gonna miss them. I miss them. The most seasoned sheepshead fisherman in the world is gonna miss them. It's just part of kind of how they bite and their mouth structure with the teeth, So yeah, they're for sure hard to feel the bite. You're gonna miss some, get a bunch of fiddlers, but I think keeping your finger on the line and trying to keep your line as tight as possible for where you think they are helps as well.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good tip of keeping your finger on the line to feel
Yeah.
that little tick. So, Wish and Fishing, hang on, he just joined in. Said I just joined in, but do you have any tips for Sheepshead and Merle's Inlet?
It's it's a tough one. You need to kind of be around the structure, and where we launch out of with the kayaks, there's a few docks, so have a pedal drive and make the run across the channel to all those docks would be my best tip. Like it's kind of a tougher
Yeah.
spot because you got to make a long run.
Yeah, yeah. I know the jetties are really good with the Sheepshead. The guys who go out there and fish all the time. I've talked to, some captains that are out there, day in and day out. And basically, if you're not throwing into the rocks there in the jetties, then you're not getting any Sheepshead. And he said, if
Yeah,
you're not getting hung up and losing hooks and weights, then you're not fishing where the Sheepshead are. So
yeah,
that's the one tip that he basically told me was, hey
yeah,
man, when you go out to Merle's and you're fishing the jetties, you need a bag full of weights and hooks because you're going to lose them because that's where they're setting.
yeah, yeah. And the other part of it, right, is like that's not a spot I would attempt in a kayak, the jetty,
Correct.
so
Yep. No.
it's boats for sure. Or even if you want to make that walk from
Hmm.
Huntington, you could have some success there. You can even try a float rig. Some guys have done that if you're just from shore. But if I was in a kayak trying Merle's Inlet, I would make a run as far kind of from Oyster Landing as you can.
Yeah.
Um, but it's tough because a lot of even those docks closest to the jetties and before you get into the cove over there, a
Hmm.
lot of that is sand bottom. So it's not like pluff mud bottom where I think there's more oysters growing. Um, so I mean, I've caught them over there. I've caught quite a few reds on some of those docks as well. But
Yeah.
uh, I would probably recommend if you're on a sheepshead kick to in a kayak, maybe try to find a few different spots to go than Merle's Inlet.
Right. Right. Wishing fishing. I appreciate you jumping in, buddy. Heath just popped something in. He said, I've talked to some anglers that said you should use J hooks and never use circle hooks. What's your opinion on that?
I've got both. I use both. Why I think I tended to start running circles more than just the normal mosquito hooks was just the amount of bycatch you get, and you're using such a small hook that I found that if I was maybe catching some reds or black drum mixed in, or even puffers or toadfish, that they kind of end up swallowing it because you're using such a small hook.
Mm,
That when I tended to go to that circle hook, all the bycatch that I was catching, they weren't swallowing it, right? So I was kind of sacrificing maybe a little more success on the sheep's head just to not only help the fish but make my life easier because then I'm tying new rigs less.
yeah. Man, I tell you what, the questions are really starting to pop in. I think we hit on something here. Appreciate you, Heath. Thanks, buddy. Keith McGee has appreciate you, man. Good to see you back in here. Says, I'm sure you adjust it based on the strength of the current, but do you start with a certain amount of weight on your Carolina rig?
Yep. And I think this is probably a 1 ounce egg sinker or maybe a half. I can't remember. I've had this weight tied on for so long. But I would suggest just either going to, whatever tackle shop that is your flavor, and just get a variety pack. And I think the biggest thing is you want to have some movement in the rig. Like you don't want to be like just glued to the bottom, right? Where you're just picking up and it's just like you're going like this. Like you want to have it flowing into the structure a little bit. So I think that's a 1 ounce on here.
Okay.
And that's probably what I usually always have.
Yeah, to start, and then you adjust from there from whatever.
Right. If it's a lazy tide, I'm probably going to drop to a split shot, or I've got it's probably some quarters here,
Yeah.
like real,
Okay.
real small ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Kaylin jumped back in and she said, do you find sheepshead to be solitary fish or hang out in groups? If you catch one on the dock, is that it, or should I move to the next one? Do they school up? Can you catch multiple sheepshead off one dock?
I've had days, man, where I've caught like 7 on one dock, and then I've gone back to the same dock and caught like 1. It's just I I think they're usually schooled up. I would say more times than not, I'll catch multiple fish on the dock, but then you might go 3 or 4 docks where there's nothing. So
Okay.
I think it's just whatever's structure types on the underneath the water, the bottom, however it's flowing. That sometimes, yeah, they'll stack up for sure.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, we are definitely at that 30 minutes. This is kind of where we want to start wrapping everything up. But I got one more question for you.
Mhm.
Sheep's head, one of the best tasting fish out there. I mean, just absolutely
Mhm.
phenomenal. I love it.
Mhm.
What is the regulation for a keeper sheep's head so that everybody kind of knows?
Oh, geez, let me pull up. I think it's 14, but I'll be honest with you, I don't keep them
Okay.
unless I think the sweet spot is probably that like 16 to 18. You know, because when you fillet a sheep's head, they've got huge rib cages, right? So the yield is very low. Like they look like big, kind of bulky fish, but the yield is like surprisingly low on them.
Oh,
So when
okay.
you're on the bottom of that, the bottom of the regulation size, I don't think it's worth it for me personally. I mean, I'm not saying to not keep one if that's what you catch, but I think closer to that 16 to 18, I think is a better yield for what you're going to get out of it when you fillet it up.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to catch one more question. Biggs just said, I'm going to Tampa. Is now a good time coming from New York? So I know, Florida, South Carolina, it's a little bit different, but I wouldn't think it would be that different as far as a sheep's head bite. I think it's probably still going to be on. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, just look for some gnarly structure with some depth, and I'd give it a shot. Really, I mean, no, any time of the year I would try because I've caught them, you know, 12 months out of the year.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, man, I appreciate you. Let everybody know where they can find you, social media, YouTube, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, YouTube will just be Coastal Carolina Living. There's kind of a variety of stuff on there. We kind of dabble in a little bit of everything. I mean, lately it's been a little slow because life's just been so busy. But Instagram, Coastal Carolina Living as well, and then I think we've got a TikTok. I'm not a big TikTok guy, but I think my wife takes care of that end of it. So
Okay.
be kind of the main ways you guys can reach us.
Yeah, yeah. And I tell you what, Steve, they do it all. The last couple of videos, I think they've been some hunting videos, some duck hunting videos. So,
Yep.
it's not all fishing all the time. It's hunting, it's outdoors. It's guys, go over, follow them, and watch their content. It's really good. It really is. But Steve, again, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for your knowledge and jumping on here. And everybody, I appreciate you guys for jumping on here and all of the great questions. And we will see everybody next week. Steve, stay on real quick. I want to talk to you for a minute. And
Mhm.
guys, same bat time, same bat channel next week, 8 o'clock, and we will see you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.